Good morning, everybody, and welcome today to Church Online. We're so glad that you're here with us, and we know we're going to have a great service this morning. So settle in with your family and your friends, whoever's watching with you, and lean in today. It's going to be a great service.
It's really great to start the service with worship, and a bit later in the service we've got our youth team who put together a worship song.
Great.
So really looking forward to worshipping together around that song as well. But it's always good to start a service in prayer. So we're going to open in prayer, but to do that today, we're going to do something a little bit different. I've just recently read a book called, I think it's called Get Your Life Back by John Eldridge. And as part of that book, he's launched an app you can get on your phone. It's called the 1 Minute Pause. And you can basically go on and anytime during your day, you can set up your notifications on your phone. So it comes up and it says, hey, pause.
Yeah.
And then you go and you can press on the 1 minute pause. So once you've done a few 1 minutes, you can progress to the 3 minute pause and then the 5 minute pause and then the 10 minute pause. But it's really good because sometimes we just need a circuit breaker in our day.
Yeah.
You know, we get so busy, there's so many things going on, you're running around. And the 1 minute pause really just helps me to sort of stop, to refocus, and to remind myself that God's in control of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
That He's the one I've got to focus on, I've got to turn to, I want to worship. So in the 1 minute pause, it just asks you a few questions and it gets you focusing on kind of your relationship with God. So I thought to start with prayer, I'd just invite you to close your eyes and I'll read a number of statements. And as I do that, it'd be good for you just to kind of meditate on that and to prepare your heart for the rest of the service this morning. And so let's close our eyes and I'll read these statements and we can prepare our hearts to worship God today. I give everything and everyone to you, God. Give all your worries and cares to God, for He cares about you. I give myself to you, Jesus, for union with you. I am created for union with you, God. I need more of you, God. Today, I open up my heart, I open up my mind, and I pray that I would hear from you today, from your word and by your Spirit. As we worship you today, we glorify you and we honour you in everything we do. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So if you're interested in that app, it's called the 1 Minute Pause. You can go and download it at the App Store.
Yes, I've got it.
Yeah, if you can reintroduce that pause into your day, I just think it helps us to keep focused on God throughout the day, no matter what we're doing, no matter how busy we are. All of us can stop for a minute. If you've got a little bit more time, you can do 3, 5 or 10 minutes, and it's very, very helpful. So
It's great.
it's a circuit breaker, which is good. Talking about circuit breakers, we'd love a COVID circuit breaker, wouldn't
Yes,
we?
absolutely.
So we thought it was about time we do a bit of an update. We've got some changes that are coming soon with the government. They're going to ease a few of those restrictions.
Yes.
And so that's happening on the 22nd of June. And so let's just outline what some of those are. So Marie, we can have up to 50 people in a room, but they've got to divide it into 2 separate groups of 20. Is that right?
That's right. You have to have the space for those people, though. So the 4 by 4 square metre rule still applies, and the 1.5 metre social distancing applies. And then, you can have no more than 20 people in a group. So even though you can have 50 people in a room, you've got to have 20 here, 20 there, and say 10 there. So you've got to have enough space in between those groups as well.
Yeah, so and whenever you gather, you've got to have hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
You've got to do the big deep clean when people are finished in the space
right.
and before they come.
Yeah. Recording contact details.
Yep. So what do you need to record for that?
You just need your first name and your mobile number, and we need to keep that securely for 28 days.
Excellent. So we're not doing any official meeting together as a church until at least the end of the school holidays that are coming up. And that includes small groups. But after that, our MCG small groups have been sent a whole bunch of documentation and things like measuring the size of your room, making sure that, you've worked out how many people you can have in your lounge room, considering things like hybrid groups. So you might have 5 people coming in person and other people may not fit in that space.
Yeah.
Or they may not feel comfortable to gather yet.
That's right.
And so offering that opportunity for some in person and the rest on Zoom. Or some groups might just decide, it's just easier to stay online for now until further restrictions are eased. And I don't think that's a bad thing to do. I guess I've been thinking a lot about our big gathering and when that might happen. And I still think we're a way off. We're not up to, we're going to be up to 50 people, but we're not up to 100 even yet.
Yeah.
And I just sort of been thinking about the bigger picture of why we actually gather to worship.
Right.
And so we gather to hear the word, obviously, that's important. But we get that online. We hear the word each week.
Right.
But we also gather for things like singing. And at the moment, it's one of the worst ways of transmitting the virus. So if we get together, we're probably not going to be able to sing at the moment. We also gather for things like morning tea and that fellowship time. Well, that's not quite as intimate when you can't hug people and shake hands and you got to stand, 1.5 meters away and, someone's going to have to walk around policing all that. So really, when you think about what church is all about, it's not a building and some of the things that we can't do at the moment, it just means it's going to be harder to do it than to not do it.
That's right.
The pros don't outweigh the cons at the moment, and so online's actually working well, and we're all looking forward to getting back together, but at the moment we just don't feel like we're at that point. So we'll keep you up to date with any changes with that, but we still think we're several months off that, unfortunately, but that's just the reality of where we're at. When we do meet together, however, we're going to have the best 1 minute welcome ever. Yeah. It's probably going to go for about 20 minutes. The whole service will be welcoming one another, but it's a really important part of what we do. And obviously we can't do that because we're not in person at the moment, but we've been doing it virtually online. And I love that because it's a chance to stop and think for all the regulars. You think about someone you haven't seen for a while. Yeah. Or someone that you want to really connect with, maybe you haven't seen them online. And this 1 minute is a chance to stop, to pause and to send them a text message or a Facebook message. You might want to call them after the service. But also for our new people, people that haven't been to a physical service before. You might be new to follow online. Yeah. You can go to the I'm New tab, click on that, let us know about your visit. And then we get in touch with you.
That's right, we will.
Welcome you and hopefully get to know you a little bit. So we're going to give you 60 seconds to do that now, and your time starts right now.
Wow, welcome back. That was a quick 1 minute, wasn't it? I hope you got in touch with somebody and that somebody got in touch with you. And again, if you think of someone later today or even during the week, just pop them a text message and just say hi. It's always good to connect any way that we can. So we had a great service last week, and Luke preached on Ephesians 4 about the fivefold ministry, or the APEST, which is apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds and teachers. So we got a lot of feedback about that message. Tell us about it, Luke.
Yeah, I think it's such an important message. Ephesians 4 is, like I said last week, a really critical passage in Scripture, and one that can really activate the church, but also I think it's one that's misunderstood and also sometimes misapplied.
Yeah.
And, growing up in church, if you've been in church for a long period of time, you probably have some contact with it, but usually it's, how can I use my gifts in a public setting in church for that 1 hour a week?
Right.
And I think it's kind of it's an immature understanding of it. And I really think we need to demystify APEST and talk more about how we can sort of mature not only in the gifts that we have, but in our understanding of it. And, some people brought up last week that when we don't understand it properly or we use it inappropriately in a public setting, it can cause damage. And that sometimes happens, I think, when people label themselves really quickly. So I'm the Apostle Luke, so I go to Officeworks and print out a name tag that says Luke the Apostle, and then I go around, or prophet or whatever, evangelist. And sometimes that can cause real damage. And so I really think we should be slow to label ourselves, but quick to discover the way God's gifted us and then how we can sort of lean into that and use that.
Yeah.
So I really think that professional ministry is not going to change the world, but when every member of the body of Christ kind of activates the God-given gifts they've been given, then I think there's really exciting potential for transformation.
Yeah.
So that's what we've got to try and do. I think the local church really is an expression of the body of Christ. When we all gather together, all those gifts come together, and if you've got a good range of gifts being used, that's a mature body. But then as the church scatters, it's the body of Christ together with other believers in the world.
Yeah.
And so those gifts need to be activated, not just for an hour at church on a weekend.
That's right, yeah.
But, in your workplace, in your family, in your community, and using those, whether it's an apostolic gift or a prophetic gift or an evangelistic shepherd teacher gift, how can you use those things? And so I think, what sparked people's, imagination a bit last week was talking about your vocation.
Yes.
And what you do. And sometimes we think, oh, well, how did you become a teacher? Well, I didn't really know what to do, so I just sort of thought, I'll sign up at uni and do a course. Well, usually I don't think that's an accident. You're actually just responding, whether you know it or not, to the gift that God's given you. You've got a gift to teach. You've got a passion for it. And so you go in. But sometimes we think, well, I go and I just do my job.
Yeah.
And then I do my ministry at church on the weekend. And I think that's the immature understanding.
Yeah.
You've got an opportunity to use that teaching gift, in your school environment, but not just teaching education, but also teaching about Jesus. And you can do that in your family, and you can do that in your friendship circles. Yeah. And so it's just taking that unique gift you've got and using it for God's glory in whatever you're doing.
Right, that's right. So for those that weren't here last week, we talked about doing some tests and to find out your gifting and your calling. So do you want to tell us about that and how people can do that?
Yeah, so there are some tests you can do. I recommended last week one on the website called Thankyou. That is a paid test. It costs about $8 to do the test, but it is very thorough. It gives you a really thorough report. But also we sent out some during the week, some free tests, and they give you the similar sort of results, just without the thick kind of explanation of it all. But you can do either of those. And I think that's really, my tip around APEST, the first thing to do is to really discover and then recognise the way God has gifted you. You are a unique individual. You've been created in the image of God. But as we saw last week, when Jesus ascended, he sent these gifts so that his body would function. Yeah. And so we actually need you. And you need me to be functioning in the gifts God's given us if we're going to be mature, if we're going to be united, if we're going to experience what it talked about, the fullness of Christ. Like, that sounds really exciting.
That's right.
I don't want to sort of feel empty. I want to feel full. Yeah. And I think when the body of Christ is functioning that way, we see this richness and this fullness and this maturity, which leads to a great impact in the world. So I think my tip would be to try and discover that gift that you've got. So do the tests first. Yeah. You can submit those results to our discipleship page. Anthony's put a link up there. Yeah. Or if you're not on that, you can just send your results to admin@follow.church. And it'd be good for us to have a bit of an understanding of what giftings we've got in our church. and how we can help develop all those gifts more.
Yeah.
But I think another important thing to do once you've done the test is to actually ask people that you know well, that sort of have been around you for a long period of time, does that sound like me? Because sometimes we can fill out tests, but maybe we're not as honest as we could be. Or maybe we rush a few answers and we put the wrong thing down.
Yeah.
Or maybe we're just not self-aware enough. And so I think usually if you fill that out well and you tell people your results, they're not going to go, what? That doesn't sound like you. They're going to go, yes, that makes sense. So I think, the test is a good start, but I think the discerning goes on over the years throughout your life as you sort of learn how God's uniquely gifted you.
So people that have done the test and discovered some giftings in their life, what do you think the next step is for those people?
Yeah, so I think just prayer. I think praying and thinking about how you can use those gifts, and not just in the church service.
Yeah.
But in every area of your life. How am I using that gift that God's given me today? How am I taking the opportunities that are in front of me to actually live out this mission? I think that's really important. And the other thing I'd say is that, and I touched on this last week, but I think it's really important to try and surround yourself with people that are different to you.
Yeah, that's true.
We just tend to gravitate to people just like us. And the problem with that is that, we might feel encouraged because we're all thinking the same and doing the same things, but we miss the diversity and we miss the fullness and the richness of Christ. And when you're with other people that are not like you, it challenges your way of thinking, and you actually learn to appreciate the unique gift they bring, not just to the body, but to you as a person. And you become more rounded as well. So I think spending time with people, which means that you'll have to listen twice as much as you speak. You have two ears and one mouth, and sometimes we're so busy speaking that we don't actually listen and appreciate people around us, or we divide at worst, like I said last week.
Yeah.
But it does require what Ephesians 4 talks about, to be completely humble, to be completely gentle, and to have that posture of, hey, I want to keep learning.
Yeah.
I want to keep growing more in my relationship with Jesus. I would really invite you to do more research as well. Go back to Ephesians 4, read over it, look at some commentaries. Alan Hirsch's book I mentioned last week called Thankyou is probably the most comprehensive read I've done on this issue. It's a heavy read, but it's a hopeful read. I came out of it thinking, wow, imagine if we could activate all these gifts everywhere we go. The possibilities are just quite endless. So I'm pretty excited about that, and I hope you are as well. So I encourage you to keep the conversations going.
Yeah.
Keep talking to one another, and just pray daily that God will give you opportunities to use those gifts everywhere you go.
Amazing.
For His glory.
Amazing.
So that would be my
awesome.
thoughts.
Fantastic.
Do you know what gifting you've been gifted with?
Yeah, I have. I did my test very early in my Christian walk, back in my early or late teens, I suppose. And so the gift of the prophet was my highest calling. And I've done that test a few times over the years, and it's always been the same. And I guess what I did back then was I had some very good mentors and youth leaders around me that helped shape me and guide me. And because it's, I've got a gift, what do I do with it? How does that outwork in my life? And so it was very good to get people around you to show you how to live your life daily, whether it's at work, in your family, or at church, and begin to express God's calling on your life as He wants you to. So, yeah. Yeah.
So for me, I do different tests and they come up a little bit different each time, but it's usually apostolic teaching.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, I planted a church and I teach every week.
It's pretty obvious.
And so even though I didn't really think about it back then, you can just look back and you go, okay, that all makes sense.
Yeah,
so,
it does. It makes sense when you find out, actually, why you are the way you are, and why you pursue things that you do. It does make sense.
So, no, it's very, very helpful. So speaking of helpful, we're going to go into a time of giving, and we have an opportunity to give to the Lord, and we can do that online. There's a number of different ways. You can go onto our website and you can set up regular giving there, or you can text give to the number that's now coming up on the screen. And I just wanted to give you a bit of an update around our finances. Obviously, COVID-19 has been a really difficult time. Some people have lost jobs, others have, a lack of security. They've had to dip into some of their savings.
That's right.
But our treasurer just recently has done the finances for us. She does them every month and gives us an update.
It's amazing.
Yeah, Raylene does a wonderful job. And we're only about 6% down on our giving this time last year, which is really incredible with all of the stuff that's going on. So just want to say thank you so much for your generosity and for the way that you've, shifted or pivoted over to online giving for those that have, and the way that you've just been faithful and generous, and that you've continued to honour God even if things are tough for you. So we really appreciate that. That gives us the ability to keep supporting missionaries like the Stauntons and the Rowcroffts we've seen recently, the Swantons in Belgium, 1188 more local stuff, some of our local mission with the food van, and then obviously things like staff and other expenses that come up. So your generous giving really helps us to do that. So I want to say thank you so much. I was on a webinar this week with a bunch of senior pastors from around Melbourne, and we're talking about the key indicators of spiritual growth and health. Even in a time like this, it's kind of hard to gauge. But one of them said that giving is one of those metrics that you can look at to tell you how healthy your church is. And so when we look at the giving at our church, if that was a metrics, it actually tells us that people are in a good place and they're continuing to be faithful.
Amazing.
So thank you so much for that. We really, really appreciate that. And it is a privilege to be able to give to God and to give back a small portion of everything that he's provided for us, so that that money can go towards extending his kingdom. So feel free to give now. And as you do that, we're going to continue to worship God in song. Paul and Jan and the team are doing a wonderful job leading us in worship. And so, as we say most weeks, this is not a time to switch off or to disengage, but it's a time to press in, to worship, to sing in your lounge room. If you haven't got a good voice, we won't hear it. So just sing to your heart's content. Remember who you're singing to. You're singing to the Lord.
That's right.
Let's do that together now.
You are God in heaven, and here am I on earth. So I'll let my words be few. Jesus, I am so in love with you, and I'll stand in awe of you. Yes, I'll stand in awe of you. And I let my words be few. Jesus, I am so in love with you.
The simplest of all love songs I want to bring to you. So I'll let my words be few. Jesus, I am so in love with you.
And I'll stand in awe of you. Yes, I'll stand in awe of you. Yes, I'll stand in awe of you. Yes, I'll stand in awe of Jesus, I am so in love with you.
Today's Bible reading is taken from Ephesians chapter 4, verses 17 to 32. So I tell you this, and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality, so as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they are full of greed. That, however, is not the way of the life you learned when you heard about Christ and were taught in him in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus. You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbour, for we are all members of one body. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. Anyone who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with their own hands, that they may have something to share with those in need. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, with whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you.
I have to admit, looking at Ephesians 4 this week, I was pretty challenged by Paul's writing. And you might think, you know what, that's great. We're meant to be challenged by the word of God, but maybe not in the way that you would be thinking. You see, Paul starts off this letter in a really abrupt kind of way. Let's have a look at it. He says, "Live no longer as the Gentiles do, for they are hopelessly confused. Their minds are full of darkness. They wander far from the life God gives because they have closed their minds and hardened their hearts against him. They have no sense of shame. They live for lustful pleasures and eagerly practice every kind of impurity." Now that's really challenging stuff. That is strong and uncomfortable words. And the reason that it challenged me and made me feel uncomfortable is because that's not how we speak to people. You know, that reminds me of a Facebook argument. You know, in face-to-face, everyone's cordial and they're happy to talk to each other. But the reality is, when you're on Facebook, people are keyboard warriors and they bring out a different side of themselves. And I feel like this is what Paul's doing. He's bringing out a different side of himself and he's being very, very harsh. And in today's world and society, we're told, don't be that harsh. Don't talk to people like that. When was the last time you walked up to someone and said, you have lustful desires? It's just not the language that we use. But it's exactly what Paul is saying in this text. And you know what? That's uncomfortable. That's kind of weird and it's backwards for our society. And hey, Paul's meant to be the guy that's going out and preaching to the Gentiles. He's meant to be the guy that's going and reaching them. He's an evangelist. He's trying to win them over. And now he's saying such harsh things about them. It's important to understand when reading this text that Paul is not racially slurring the Gentiles. That is not what he's trying to communicate here. He's talking to a very young set of Christians in the church in Ephesus, and all he's doing is drawing a contrast to the Gentiles and showing that's how the Christians used to live, but shouldn't be living anymore. In fact, he's been doing it all the way through Ephesians. In Ephesians 2, he talked about how we were dead and now alive. He talked about how before we met Jesus, we had disunity and fighting, but now we're unified in Jesus Christ. And also that we have now new gifts that we can exercise as Christians. So he's actually following the same platform he's been using the whole way through in saying, this is how we used to live, but now you live a different way. Now, the language is quite strong and it might actually miss some of today's culture. So what does that look like for today to live the way that Paul has just described? You know, it's easy for us to look at the things that we do, the addictions that we have, the brokenness, the unforgiveness that we hold in our hearts, the sin that we commit with our hands and our feet. and we go out and we do the wrong thing and the things that we know that God has told us not to do. That is living the not God of this earth. And that's what Paul's saying, is that the Gentiles were living the not God of the earth. But I think it goes further than that, because too often we look at the things that we do and we don't look at the things that affect us in other ways, that external factors. Because we have things that happen in our lives that cause depression and anxiety and brokenness and pain and grief. And the interesting thing about the things that we do and the things that happen to us is that they're not just one-off instances. It'd be so easy and it'd actually be so wonderful if the things that happened in our life only happened in that instance. But they actually cause lifelong scars. And those labels stick with us for the rest of our lives. And today I want to show you what that might look like, because when we actually have those things happen to us, we try to shrug them off or sweep them under the carpet. But the reality is, every time a relationship fails, we become broken. Or maybe someone will tell us something bad about ourselves or that we're not good enough, and we put that label on. Or maybe we've made a poor choice and we've given ourselves away and we see ourselves as dirty. Or maybe we have an addiction, whether it be to a substance or to pornography or anything that we know that God has not called us to. Or because maybe circumstance has caused us to have mental illness and we have depression or anxiety and we're mentally damaged. Or people in our life leave us and we feel lost and lonely. But most of these things cause an immense amount of hurt and pain. And the reason I put these on myself is because everything that happens in our life causes labels. And the reality is we put these labels on ourselves, and we walk according to what we feel God wants us to do, and we go to church and we pray and we read the Bible, but sometimes behind the scenes, we're carrying these labels. And these labels aren't visible to everybody else, but they're very evident to ourselves. And that's not the life that God's called us to. You see, when I was younger, I was about 13 years old, and I remember one day, about 2 o'clock in the morning, one night, 2 o'clock in the morning, my dad walks into my bedroom and says, "Adam, I just wanted to remind you that you're a loser, you're a no-hoper, and you'll never amount to anything." And I remember that day, I put that label on myself. I'm a loser. I'm a no-hoper. I'll never amount to anything. And that's the story of my life. That's what I took on as my character. That was who I was. Nearly 3 years ago, I got a phone call from my brother saying that my sister had passed away. And I was flung into anxiety like I've never experienced in my life. And then anxiety was a label I placed on myself. I wasn't Adam who had anxious thoughts. I was Adam who had anxiety. And that was my future. That was my forever. This was the new me. What are those things that have happened in your life, or those things that you've done in life that have caused you to label yourself in a way that God wouldn't label you? And you put those labels on and hide them from everybody else because you're so ashamed of them. You know that's not how you should be, but they're there nonetheless. And sometimes in our mind, that's not just the label we put on right now, but that's our future forever. That's us. We will never change. But Paul doesn't finish by just slamming the Gentiles. He goes on in the next verse to give us some amazing hope. He says, "But that isn't what you learned about Christ." All the worries of the world, all the depression, all the anxiety, all the brokenness, all the addiction, all the pain, it doesn't take much to see what's going on in the world today. You look at social media and you see all the news articles that come through. You turn on the night news and you can see all the pain and unrest and the worries of the world all coming in. And you know what? It's very easy to go into this space of, man, we live in such a broken world. It's horrible. But it's not what we learned about Christ. That's not who he is. All those worries aren't Jesus. All those concerns, they're not Jesus. The depression and the anxiety, that's not Jesus. Your addiction is not Jesus. Your brokenness is not Jesus. And because it's not Jesus, it also doesn't have to be you, because you can live in the character of Jesus because of what he's done. And the world is so different to Jesus. You see, where the world says there's depression, Jesus says there's joy. Where the world says there's anxiety, Jesus says there's peace. Where the world says brokenness, Jesus says wholeness. Where the world says pain, Jesus says healing. Where the world says unforgiveness and infidelity, Jesus says forgiveness and faithfulness. Where the world says addiction and racism, Jesus says freedom and unity. And where the world says abuse, Jesus says love. The world we live in and the things that drag us down and cause us to put labels on ourselves is not Jesus. And we as Christians don't have to live in that space. Culture might have told us who we're meant to be, but Jesus says something radically different. I'm reminded of the lady with the issue of blood. And in Luke 8, we see that story, and I'll quickly read it to you now. And there's some amazing things that happen in this. It says, a woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding, and she could find no cure. Coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe. Immediately, the bleeding stopped. Who touched me? Jesus asked. Everyone denied it, and Peter said, Master, this whole crowd is pressing up against you. But Jesus said, someone deliberately touched me, for I felt healing power go out of me. When the woman realized that she could not stay hidden, she began to tremble and fell to her knees in front of him. The whole crowd heard her explain why she had touched him and that she had immediately been healed. Daughter, he said to her, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. You know, this is a really culturally rich story. You see, this woman had the issue of blood, and bleeding was an unclean thing in Jewish culture. You know, in fact, the monthly flow of a woman would see her unclean, not just for the time that she had the flow, but also for 7 days after and until she'd had a ceremonial bath. So for basically half of a woman's life, she was unclean. This lady was unclean for over a decade. And being unclean, she couldn't be with society. She was outcast to the skirts of town. She was not allowed to be with people or touch people, particularly men or rabbis. She was scum. She was downtrodden. She was marginalized, pushed to the edges of society. That's who culture told her she was. And to her, she could have easily put the labels on herself. I'm broken. I'm dirty. I have to be out on the outskirts. I'm lesser than everybody else. But in the time she saw Jesus, she recognized that she could get a new identity. And when she reached out and touched Jesus and told her the story, Jesus gave her exactly that. You see, the story starts with a woman. And a woman touched Jesus' garment. But when Jesus addresses her, he says, Daughter, your faith has made you well. She's no longer labeled as lower than everybody else, unclean, dirty, filthy. She was family. She was a daughter. She'd gained a new identity. Now, when I look at the not God of the world and then I reflect on who Jesus is, that's someone who I want to follow. Don't you want to follow that person? You know, this wouldn't be a sermon from me if there wasn't a movie reference, but it does remind me of The Hobbit. There is a scene in The Hobbit where the main dwarf, Thorin Oakenshield, is fighting an army of orcs. And after defeating them, one of his friends, Balin, looks at him and he's standing there with courage and authority and victory and leadership. And Balin says, there is one I could follow. When I look at the horrible things that happen in our world, the way that I've fallen short of God's glory, and I look at my own personal labels that I've put on myself, and I see Jesus who offers me new identity, who says, you know what, you don't have to live that way anymore. You are family, you are clean, you are whole, you are forgiven. How can we not say, there is one I could follow? And Paul gives us further instruction. He says in Ephesians 4:22-24, Throw off your old sinful nature and your former way of life, which is corrupted by lust and deception. Instead, let the Spirit renew your thoughts and attitudes. Put on your new nature, created to be like God, truly righteous and holy. Now, I don't know about you, but if I read that, that's a lot of work. How can I be like that? I've got so much sin in my life and I'm definitely not perfect. It's not like the day I decided to make Jesus my Lord and Savior that I didn't sin anymore. There's still things I do wrong. How hard is it to take off the old self and put on the new self, the new me, the new identity? That's really hard and it's going to take a lot of work. When I was younger, I used to play football for a team called Wesley Hill in central Victoria. And we had the worst football ground out of all the teams. And we had the worst club rooms of all the teams. And every Saturday we'd go out and we'd play. And our ground was pretty trashy, so we'd run around and we'd be caked in mud. We'd be sliding around and it would be absolutely disgusting, to the point where we'd have mud caked into our football boots. All our socks would be just brown. We had a red football uniform, but by the end of the game, it was all brown. We had mud under our fingernails, in my hair when I had it, with mud just everywhere. And at the end of the game, we'd go into the club rooms and we'd listen to the coach as he debriefed some of the game. And as I said, we didn't have a very good club room, so we didn't even have showers. So at the end of the game, we would stand up after our debrief and we would have the mud that would have dried to us. And we'd stand up and we'd go outside and our parents would be there waiting to take us home. And my mum would pack me and my brothers into the car and take us home. And the rule was after football that we were not allowed in the house until mum had cleared us to step inside the house. So I remember after every Saturday, we'd be out on the front veranda and we'd be clacking our football boots together, trying to get the mud out. And we'd be, stripping down to our underwear just to get all the mud off our clothes. And we'd be pulling it out of our hair and out of our arm hair and all that sort of stuff. And it would take us a good half hour just to actually be prepared enough that mum would let us inside the house. And when we got inside the house, then it was shower time. So one by one, we'd go and hit the showers and we'd start cleaning and we'd be scrubbing and, you'd miss a part on your arm where there's some dirt and it would pulled all the hairs together. You have to scrub that for ages and then you have to work on your fingernails and then your toenails and get all the mud out of everywhere. And then as you got out, you'd dry your hair and you'd realise that the towel was turning brown and you didn't get it all out of your hair properly. So back in the shower you went to clean it all out. And finally you would be clean enough that you would say, you know what, I am no longer muddy. I'm no longer feeling the pressure of all this mud all over me. And I feel nice. It's like when you go exercising for ages and you have a shower and you just feel really, really good about yourself. You're clean and you're nice. And when I think about putting on the new self, that's what I think about. Man, this is going to take a lot of work. This is going to take a lot of clacking my footy boots together and, stripping on the veranda and making sure I wash under my fingernails for like 20 or 30 minutes and, multiple trips in and out of the shower just to clean myself. Like this is a long process. Justification by faith is free and immediate, but sanctification, becoming more like Jesus every day, that's going to take time. Like, I don't know if I can do this. This is a big call that Paul's asking us to do, to put on the new nature. If that's what you're thinking as well, I've got some amazing news for you, is that the work has already been done. That's not for you to do. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the things that we do wrong in life, we don't have to fix. We do have to fix them. If we use foul language, we fix that. If we have bitterness, we fix that. If we're holding unforgiveness or resentment in our hearts, we need to work on that. But the reality is that is not going to make God say, now I accept you. That's the process of sanctification, becoming more like Jesus. But we're talking about justification in putting on the new self. You see, Jesus has already done it. Yes, I have to do the work, but these labels, I can take them off today, right now. You see, Jesus 2,000 years ago died on a cross, so I didn't have to do all the work to see myself approved by God. And now, because I can put my faith in Jesus, all these labels can be gone because God sees Jesus in me. And now when I look at my new creation, which can be immediate, I can see that I'm a child of God. I can see that I'm set free. I can see that I'm valuable, that I'm healed, that I'm clean, and that I'm made perfect in Jesus Christ. Now, it doesn't mean I never make mistakes, but it means the new nature I've put on is Jesus Christ. That when God looks at me, he doesn't see some muddy kid with football boots that are caked in mud. He sees me as he sees Jesus, fully white, fully clean, fully perfect, even though I'm not, but that's how he sees me, because that's our new nature, to be like Jesus Christ. He goes on, and this is a real slog, this next part that Paul goes into, because he starts talking about all the things that we should give up, and we definitely should. He says in Ephesians 4:25-31, "Stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbours the truth, for we are all parts of the same body, and don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil. If you're a thief, quit stealing. Instead, use your hands for good and hard work, and then give generously to others in need. Don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that the words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. And do not bring sorrow to God's Holy Spirit by the way you live. Remember, he has identified you as his own, guaranteeing that you will be saved on the day of redemption. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior." Now, this is a great roadmap for the things that we are to achieve. We are to work on these things and become better at these things. But here's what I've learned over my time as being a Christian, is that this is usually a barrier, a roadblock for people getting to know Jesus, because they read verses like this and they struggle. I remember years ago, I was on the bus to Youth Alive in Melbourne when I was a kid, and I remember having conversations about God, which I had all the zeal for, but probably not the intellect for, and how to follow him. And I remember one guy saying, "I'm not a Christian, I'm coming to Youth Alive because my friends are here, but I don't want to follow God. Following God is rules and regulations and all the things that I like to do, God hates to do, and he tells me to do all these things. And you know what? God just wants to restrict me. He wants to put me in a box. And that's not how I want to live my life. I want to be free." But you know what? These rules aren't here to restrict us. They're here to free us and to protect us. Because God's asked us to live a certain way, and he knows that way is fulfilling. He knows that it's an abundant life to live like Jesus. He knows that it's free. And if we don't live that way, we aren't free. Imagine a time in your life where you have had an argument with somebody and it's been kind of nasty, and when you come away from an argument, you feel guilt and you feel really down about yourself because you know what? It's been a really gross conversation that you've just had, and there's been hurt exchanged both ways, and they're not feeling good and you're not feeling good. You don't feel free. And when you go to sleep, if you let the sun go down on that argument, it only builds. You don't feel free. But those times where you ring up that friend or you see that friend face to face and you say, "Hey, let's make amends. I apologize for what I've done," and they apologize for what they've done. That feeling right there, that relief of this relationship has been restored and it's right, and I'm not carrying this baggage of guilt on me anymore, that's freedom. So all the things that we do in life that God's like, "Hey, don't do that," is not because he wants to restrict us, because he wants us to be free. But also he wants to protect us. Like a parent who stops their child from touching a heater or walking out into traffic. There are rules. Don't touch the heater. Don't walk out in the front yard to the road. They're not there to restrict someone from having a fun time on the road. They're to protect. So these things here, like the way that God said, don't do these things, is not to restrict us. It's to protect us and help us feel free, and to be free as Jesus wants us to be free. And then finally in Ephesians 4:32, Paul says this: "Instead, be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you." We are to take on the character of Christ. He forgave us, so we are to forgive others. But not only that, is that when we do that, we example the character of Jesus. Some people will never open a Bible, and you are the only Bible they're going to get. And the reality is that if we are exempling the character of Jesus, they can see Jesus. And earlier in this scripture, Paul says, it's not what you learned in Christ. Those bad things, and that's not Christ. If you're representing Jesus and you're living like Christ, that's how other people might learn about Christ. You are an ambassador for Jesus. So my homework for you, because Luke loves going out homework and I want to get in on the action, is this. I want you to write a list of the labels that you've given yourself. Now, this isn't a list that I want you to put on the Follow Discipleship page or even email to anybody. You don't have to show anyone. This is just between you and God. Write down a list of the labels that you've given yourself or other people around you have given you that you're walking in. And then I want you to open the scriptures and I want you to find where in the Bible God says that about you. If you can find that answer, give it a tick. If you don't find anywhere in scripture where God says that about you, a label that you've given yourself, cross it off. And at the end, I want you to look at that list and remind yourself who God's called you to be. And as you look through, if there's new things that God says about you that you didn't realize or weren't even on your radar, add them to your list. Because too often we look at the brokenness of the world and the brokenness of ourselves, and we beat ourselves up. And we're the worst. How can God love us? How can we be used by God? But that's not what God says. God says, look how healed you are. Look at what Jesus did for you. Now you can live like that. You're not broken. You know what? There's depression and anxiety. You don't have to live there. You can step out of that. You can be free. I don't know about you, but when I look at Jesus and the freedom he gives, I can't help but worship him. I can't help but be thankful. And I would hope and pray that my life would example his so other people can get to know him as well. What an encouragement for us all that we are free from all of the world's pain and brokenness through Jesus. We have a new identity. That's family. We are sons and daughters of the King. That's all of us. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for your word. I want to thank you that you give encouragement and correction through your word. But God, today that you've encouraged us, that even though we look at our own brokenness and the labels that people in our life have put on us, God, I love hearing that you've given us a new identity. That we're not known by those broken things, God. We're not known by the not God of the world, but we're known by you. And we're labeled by you as free, as sons and daughters. And God, anyone here today who is struggling with that concept of being in your family, I ask right now that you would be near to them, that you would touch their hearts, and you would reveal yourself in new and fresh and exciting ways and encourage them. In the precious and mighty name of Jesus, I pray. Amen. Have a great week.
Hey, Follow Church. We're a part of the youth worship team. We've been putting together a few set lists for the youth, and we'd love to give you guys a bit of a preview into what we've been doing. We hope you enjoy it as much as we enjoyed putting it together.
God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonders of life. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars were made to worship worship so alive. I can see your heart in everything you've made. Every burning star, a signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises so alive.
Your promise, don't speak in vain, syllable empty or void. Once you have spoken, nature and science follow the sound of your voice.
And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath. You're roving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals in nature's so alive, I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you so alive. So send it so loud. If the rocks cry out in silence so loud, if the sum of all our praise is still for shine,
then we'll sing again 100 billion times.
Chase down my heart through all of my failure and pride. On the hill you created, the light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. And as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. Where you lost your life so I can find it here. If you left the grave behind you so alive, I can see your heart in everything you've done. Every path designed in a work of art called love. If you gladly chose surrender, so will I can see your heart 8 billion precious one, a child you died to save. If you gave your life to love them so alive, like you would again 100 billion times, what measure could amount to your desire?
You're the one that never leaves the one behind.
Well, what a great message. Thank you so much for that, Adam. Really appreciate that, putting off our old self and putting on the new self in Christ.
And how encouraging was it to see the young people doing that
Oh, what a
worship song?
great song.
It's so great to see young people rising up, using their gifts, and I really hope and pray that you are all encouraged by that this morning. Well, it's been a great day on Follow Online.
Yes, another great day.
Absolutely. We hope you have a wonderful week. Keep pressing into God, keep using everything He's given you to bless people, and we look forward to gathering with you again next week at Follow Online.
Absolutely. See you.
Thanks for tuning in to Follow Online. To stay updated, go to follow.church. As the people of God, let's stay connected and follow the words of Jesus to love one another.